Ryan's office revenge. You'll understand his credentials justify the compensation difference. That's what Patricia Coleman from HR said while sliding my annual review across her desk. One number on that page told me everything I needed to know about how this company really valued 15 years of keeping their systems running. My name's Charlie Stevens. I'm 49, been working in tech since I got out of the Army at 24. Never thought I'd be the guy walking out over money, but here we are. The number that caught my eye wasn't my pathetic 2% raise. It was Kevin Price's starting salary that someone had accidentally left in the shared folder. Kid's got 8 months at the company, fresh MBA from Wharton, and he's pulling 40% more than me. Same department, technically the same level, but somehow his strategic initiatives pay better than keeping the lights on. You want to know what strategic initiatives look like? Last week, Kevin scheduled a 2-hour meeting to discuss optimizing our technical debt prioritization matrix. 15 people in a room, including 3 senior engineers who were supposed to be fixing actual problems, so we could watch him present a color-coded spreadsheet that basically said, fix the important stuff first. Revolutionary thinking right there. Let me back up. I've been at TechFlow Systems for 15 years, watching this place grow from a scrappy startup to a mid-size company that processes millions in online transactions daily. When I started, the founders still wrote code and understood that downtime meant dead customers. Tom Bradley and Sarah Kim, the original owners, used to sleep in the office during major deployments. They'd buy pizza for anyone pulling weekend shifts and actually knew what our systems did. These days, we've got executives who think engineering is just another cost center to optimize. CEO George Morrison talks about leveraging human capital and maximizing operational efficiency. Translation: pay less, expect more, and hire people with fancy degrees to make it look professional. I came up through the ranks the old-fashioned way. Started as a junior back-end engineer making $35,000 a year, grateful just to be writing code for a paycheck. Learned every system we had. Volunteered for the late-night emergencies nobody wanted. Christmas Eve 2010, our main database server crashed during the holiday shopping rush. While everyone else was home opening presents, I spent 14 hours rebuilding indexes and recovering transactions. Saved the company about $800,000 in lost sales that day. That's when I became the guy people called when things broke at 3 a.m. on weekends. Call Charlie, he'll know what's wrong. And I always did know. Not because I'm some genius, but because I'd seen every failure mode, documented every workaround, lived through every crisis that turned my pager into a stress machine. By 2015, I was senior engineer. By 2018, I was the lead on our payment processing team, which handles about 2.4 million transactions daily for retailers across the country. When their systems go down, cash registers stop working. Online shopping carts break. Customer service phones start ringing with angry people who can't buy what they need. I built our current payment processing architecture from scratch after the Black Friday disaster of 2018. Old system couldn't handle the load, started dropping transactions left and right. Customers lost orders, retailers lost money, and we nearly lost our biggest contracts. I spent that Thanksgiving weekend redesigning the entire pipeline, implementing proper load balancing and failover protocols that could scale to handle traffic spikes. The new system has been rock solid ever since. 0 major outages in 4 years. But you know what I got for that architectural miracle? A 3% raise and a coffee mug that said Systems Hero. Meanwhile, the VP of Engineering who approved the budget for my project got promoted to Senior VP and a 25% bump. Designed the monitoring systems that catch problems before customers. Notice. Wrote the incident response playbooks that turn 6-hour outages into 15-minute blips. Created the automated alerting that pages the right people when specific thresholds get crossed. built the dashboard that lets management see system health at a glance, though most of them just want to know if the numbers are green. I've got notebooks full of this stuff. Not fancy documentation in corporate wikis, but real operational knowledge. Like how the reconciliation service has to be restarted in a specific sequence, or it corrupts the transaction queue. How the payment gateway starts throwing false errors when memory usage hits 85%. But you can't just add more RAM because of a driver compatibility issue. How the load balancer configuration file has a comment that says do not change this value but doesn't explain why, because the original engineer left 5 years ago, and I'm the only one who remembers it'll crash the whole system. None of that seemed to matter when CEO George Morrison decided to professionalize the company. Translation: hire MBAs and standardize everything according to market rates for their alma maters. Suddenly, we had directors of strategic programs who couldn't SSH into a server, but could make beautiful presentations about technical debt and scalability roadmaps. We got program managers who scheduled meetings about planning meetings, technical product managers who wanted to ideate around our infrastructure optimization opportunities, directors of engineering excellence who'd never actually engineered anything but had really strong opinions about agile methodology and OKR frameworks. Kevin Price was the poster child for this new direction. Kid's smart, I'll give him that. Good at asking questions, quick to pick up concepts, knows how to work a room. But 8 months ago, he was studying case competitions, not debugging production systems at 2 a.m. His big contribution so far has been a risk assessment matrix that color codes our infrastructure based on business impact metrics. It's actually not terrible as PowerPoint presentations go, but it basically tells us what we already knew. The payment system is critical, the backup servers are important, and the test environment can wait if we're busy. Groundbreaking stuff. Kevin spent 3 weeks interviewing every engineer on the team, asking us to rate our systems on scales of 1 to 10 for various risk factors. Then he plugged our answers into some consulting framework he learned at business school and produced a beautiful chart that proved our payment infrastructure was high risk, high impact. No kidding, Kevin. That's why I've been saying we need more budget for redundancy upgrades since 2019. But here's the thing that really got to me. 2 months ago, Kevin suggested we migrate our entire customer database to a NoSQL solution because it's more scalable and aligns with modern architecture patterns. Presented a whole deck about it, complete with industry benchmarks and cost projections. George Morrison loved it, said it showed forward-thinking technical leadership. I had to explain in a follow-up email why that would destroy our transaction integrity. Our payment processing depends on ACID compliance, atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability. You can't just throw financial data into a document database because it's trendy. One corrupted transaction could cost us millions in regulatory fines, not to mention customer trust. Kevin's response? Thanks for the feedback, Charlie. I'll incorporate your concerns into the next iteration of the proposal. Next iteration. Like moving from relational to NoSQL databases was some kind of agile development sprint you could iterate on. Meanwhile, I'm still the one fixing the actual problems. Last month, when our payment gateway started throwing intermittent errors during peak traffic, Kevin's risk matrix said it was medium priority. Monitor closely. Great analysis, Kevin. Very actionable. I spent my Saturday morning tracing the issue to a race condition in our legacy reconciliation service, the one that processes refunds. Turns out, when transaction volume hit a certain threshold, 2 processes would try to update the same record simultaneously, causing deadlocks that cascaded through the system. Without that fix, we would have had angry customers and regulatory complaints by Monday morning. Kevin sent a Slack message that afternoon. Great work debugging that issue, Charlie. Mind documenting the root cause for our next risk review? Sure thing, Kevin. I'll explain race conditions to you while you collect your MBA salary. But the real breaking point came 3 weeks ago, And it wasn't even about Kevin. It was about my family. Linda, my wife, got diagnosed with breast cancer last year. Stage 2, caught early, good prognosis. But the treatment's been rough. She's 47, works as a nurse at the local hospital. Always been the healthy one in our family. Never smoked, exercises regularly, eats better than I do. Cancer doesn't care about any of that. The oncology bills have been hitting us hard, even with insurance. Co-pays for chemo sessions, prescription costs, the special supplements her doctor recommended. Plus, Linda had to cut back her hours during the worst parts of treatment, which meant less income right when our expenses went up. On top of that, our son Jason's a sophomore at State University, studying mechanical engineering. Smart kid, works hard, but college costs keep climbing. Even at a state school, we're looking at $18,000 a year for tuition, room, and board. He's got some scholarship money and works part-time at the campus bookstore, but we're still covering most of it. Jason wants to be an engineer like his old man, which makes me proud and worried at the same time. Proud because he's got the curiosity and problem-solving mindset for it. Worried because I want him to have better opportunities than I did, and that means finishing his degree without crushing debt. So when Linda chemo session scheduled, and Jason called asking for help with next semester's expenses, I figured 15 years of solid performance and critical expertise had to count for something. I'd been getting LinkedIn messages from recruiters for months. Market rates for senior engineers with my background were running 15 to 20% higher than what TechFlow was paying me. I scheduled a meeting with Patricia Coleman, laid out my case professionally, brought printouts of salary surveys, examples of my contributions, documentation of the projects I'd delivered, mentioned the crises I'd prevented, the knowledge I'd accumulated, the systems I'd built from scratch. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable, I told her. Just a fair adjustment to bring my compensation in line with industry standards for someone with my experience and responsibilities. Patricia listened politely, took notes, said she'd review everything with the compensation committee. 2 weeks later, she called me back for this meeting. That's when she pulled out the annual review with that 2% number. "Charlie, we appreciate everything you've done," she said, using that HR voice that sounds sympathetic but isn't. Professional concern, like she was delivering bad news about a dental procedure. "But we have to maintain equity across the organization." "Equity," I said. "You mean paying Kevin 40% more than me is equitable?" Her shoulders tensed. "Kevin's role involves strategic planning and requires specific educational credentials that command premium compensation in the current market." Strategic planning. Like suggesting we throw away our transaction integrity for a trendy database? "Charlie, Kevin brings fresh perspective and modern approaches to complex technical challenges. And I bring 15 years of keeping this place from falling apart. I built the payment system that processes 2.4 million transactions a day. I designed the monitoring that prevents outages. I wrote the playbooks that save your company millions when things go wrong. What's that worth?" Patricia looked at her notes, avoiding my eyes. "The 2% adjustment reflects your current performance level and market position within our standardized compensation bands." "Current performance level," I repeated. "What exactly would I have to do to get into the next band?" She shifted in her chair. "Well, typically advancement requires demonstrated leadership capabilities, strategic thinking, and relevant educational qualifications, like an MBA. Educational credentials are one factor we consider, yes. So 15 years of actual results matter less than 2 years of business school." "Charlie, I understand your frustration, but the company is evolving. We need team members who can adapt to new methodologies and strategic frameworks." That's when I realized they'd already written me off. Not as incompetent, but as outdated. A legacy system they tolerated because replacing me seemed harder than maintaining me. They wanted someone who could adapt to new methodologies and strategic frameworks, But what they really wanted was someone who wouldn't ask for fair compensation based on actual results. If you're not comfortable with this arrangement, Patricia continued, you're welcome to explore other opportunities. Other opportunities, I repeated. You mean accept this or leave? I wouldn't put it that way, Charlie. How would you put it? She met my eyes then, and I saw something like genuine regret there. Charlie, you're a valuable employee, but the company is evolving. We need team members who can think strategically about our future direction, not just maintain our current systems. That's when something clicked. They weren't just undervaluing my work, they were actively devaluing it. In their minds, keeping systems running was maintenance work, something you outsourced or automated away. The real value was in strategic thinking, in frameworks and methodologies and other MBA buzzwords that Kevin could deliver with a straight face. I pulled out my phone and opened the resignation letter I'd drafted the night before, just in case this conversation went exactly like I thought it would. Filled in the date, signed my name, and slid it across her desk. Effective immediately, I said. Patricia stared at the paper like I'd handed her a live grenade. Charlie, you don't need to make a decision right now. Take some time to think about it. Talk to your manager. We could revisit the compensation discussion in 6 months. I just did think about it, for 15 years. And you told me exactly what the company thinks my contribution is worth. I believe you. What about your projects? The transition planning? The documentation handoffs? I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in months. My documentation is up to date. My run books are complete. All the institutional knowledge Kevin's been trying to capture in his risk matrices is written down somewhere. If strategic thinking is so valuable, I'm sure he can figure it out. Charlie, please, can we at least discuss a transition? Timeline? 2 weeks' notice? Patricia, you just told me I need to adapt to new methodologies or explore other opportunities. I'm adapting, right now. She looked at the resignation letter again, then back at me. What am I supposed to tell George? The engineering team? You're the most senior person on the payment infrastructure. Tell them they can schedule consulting time through my new employer. I'm sure they'll bill at market rates for my expertise. Your new employer? I smiled. I've been getting recruiting calls for months. Streamline Technologies has been trying to poach me for 2 years. Guess today's a good day to return their calls. That was Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. By 2:45, my badge was deactivated. By 3 o'clock, my laptop was wiped and sitting in a cardboard box with my coffee mug and the photo of Linda and Jason from my desk. By 3:15, I was walking through the open plan engineering floor, nodding at people who suddenly found their monitors very interesting. Scott Parker, our SRE lead, and probably my best friend at the company, caught me at the elevator. Charlie, what the hell? Patricia sent an email saying, you're leaving effective today. What happened? They offered me 2% and told me to understand that Kevin's MBA makes him worth 40% more than me. Scott's face went pale. You're kidding. Wish I was. Good luck with everything, Scott. You're a good engineer and a better friend. Maybe think about updating your resume. Charlie, you can't just leave. You built half the stuff we run on, and I documented all of it. Should be fine. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. Give my best to the team. I drove home in my 2018 Chevy Silverado, windows down, classic rock playing, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not because I was unemployed, but because I'd finally stopped accepting less than I was worth. Linda was in the kitchen when I walked in, sitting at our small table with her laptop open, paying bills. She looked up when I came through the door, carrying my cardboard box. That doesn't look good, she said. Depends on your perspective. I just quit. She closed the laptop and gave me her full attention. Tell me what happened. I sat down across from her and explained the whole thing. The 2% offer, Patricia's speech about strategic frameworks, Kevin's 40% premium for having the right credentials. Linda listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love about her. She processes the whole story before reacting. "Good," she said when I finished. "Good? I just quit my job with no notice. We've got medical bills, Jason's tuition coming up next month. And you've got 15 years of experience that any decent company would pay properly for. Maybe now you'll find one that actually values what you know." She was right, of course. Linda's always been the practical one in our family, the one who sees past the immediate crisis to the bigger picture. You've been complaining about that place for 3 years, about how they don't respect engineering, about how they promote MBAs over people who actually understand the business. Maybe this was exactly what needed to happen. I've already got 3 companies that want to talk to me. Streamline's been persistent, and their offer was 60% more than what TechFlow was paying me. So call them. I pulled out my phone and found Dr. Sandra Richardson's number. She was Streamline's CTO, had been recruiting me personally for 2 years. Her assistant picked up. "Dr. Richardson's office." "Hi, this is Charlie Stevens. Dr. Richardson asked me to call if I ever decided to make a move. Is she available? Let me check. May I ask what company you're with currently?" As of about an hour ago, none. 20 minutes later, I had a phone interview scheduled for Thursday morning and a formal offer process that Dr. Richardson promised would be competitive and respectful. She also mentioned they'd been having problems with their payment infrastructure and could use someone with deep expertise in transaction processing. But first, I wanted to see how TechFlow handled life without their most expensive legacy system. I didn't have to wait long. Thursday morning, I woke up to missed calls from Scott Parker and texts asking if I was available to chat urgently about a technical issue. I checked TechFlow's public status page over coffee. Yellow alert. Investigating elevated error rates in payment processing systems. By noon, it was red. Major service disruption affecting transaction processing. We are working to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. Scott called again while I was reviewing Streamline's technical documentation for my afternoon interview. "Charlie, thank God. We've got a massive problem with the payment reconciliation service. It's stuck in some kind of loop, and we can't restart it without corrupting the pending transaction queue." "That's rough," I said. "What does Kevin's risk matrix say about it?" "This isn't funny, man. We've got customers calling, revenue's bleeding, and George is losing his mind. The Westfield Mall chain is threatening to drop us if we don't get this fixed in the next 2 hours. Sorry to hear that, Scott. Can you just tell me what the restart sequence is? As a friend? As a friend, I'm telling you to check the runbook I wrote for handling reconciliation failures. It's in the team wiki under Payment Infrastructure Emergency Procedures." We did check. It says to restart the service in sequence with the primary database, but there's some step missing. The service comes back up, but immediately starts throwing deadlock errors. I sipped my coffee and thought about Linda's oncology appointment next week. Maybe Kevin can figure it out. He's got that MBA and all those strategic frameworks. "Charlie, come on. You know Kevin doesn't understand the technical architecture. He's been asking everyone what asset compliance means. Then maybe it's time for him to learn, or for management to realize the difference between strategic thinking and actually knowing how systems work." Scott was quiet for a moment. "They're talking about bringing in expensive consultants, emergency rates. The board's involved. Sounds expensive. Good thing they saved money on my 2% raise." The outage lasted 14 hours. By the time they got systems fully operational again, TechFlow had lost $4.2 million in failed transactions and racked up another $1.8 million in SLA penalties. Their biggest customer, the Westfield chain, issued a public statement about evaluating alternative payment processing partners due to reliability concerns. Friday afternoon, Susan Rodriguez, the CEO's assistant, called my personal number. "Charlie, George needs to speak with you urgently. There's been a significant incident, and frankly, the team is struggling without your expertise. I'm not on the team anymore, I said. Remember? I needed to adapt to new methodologies or explore other opportunities. I chose other opportunities. This is about consulting work, emergency rates, whatever you want to charge. I already have consulting work lined up. Streamline Technologies offered me a position yesterday evening. Senior architect role, 60% more than my base at TechFlow, plus equity and actual respect for technical expertise. Her voice got sharper. Charlie, you can't just abandon us in the middle of a crisis. I didn't abandon anyone. I resigned after being told my 15 years of expertise was worth a 2% raise, while an MBA with 8 months of experience gets 40% more. You made it clear what the company values. George wants to discuss a significant compensation adjustment. Too late for that conversation. Should have happened Tuesday. I hung up and called Jason at college to tell him tuition wouldn't be a problem next semester. Monday morning brought more desperate calls. Timothy Walsh, the CFO, reached out personally. Charlie, I've reviewed the compensation decisions, and frankly, we made a mistake. Would you consider returning at a senior architect level? We're prepared to match whatever Streamline offered. Timothy, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to believe that strategic frameworks matter more than operational knowledge. Now you're learning what happens when your frameworks meet reality. We're hemorrhaging money. Our stock price dropped 12% this week. 3 more major customers are reviewing their contracts, and I'm sure Kevin's working on a strategic response matrix to prioritize your customer retention initiatives. Tuesday morning, I started at Streamline Technologies. Dr. Sandra Richardson gave me the tour personally, introduced me to a team that included 4 other senior engineers, each with 10+ years of experience. No MBAs in sight, just people who understood that complex systems require deep knowledge to maintain properly. We've been watching TechFlow's outage, Dr. Richardson mentioned. Painful way to learn about the value of institutional knowledge. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. 6 months later, I was having coffee with Scott Parker, who'd taken my advice about updating his resume. He'd joined Streamline as a senior SRE and was making 45% more than TechFlow had paid him. You know what the craziest part is? Scott said. They hired you back as a consultant at $250 an hour to document everything you already knew. Took you 3 months to write down 15 years of operational knowledge. And Kevin? Transferred to business development. Turns out his MBA actually matters there. George finally admitted that strategic planning works better when you understand what you're planning for. What about the payment infrastructure? Running smooth now that we've got proper documentation and monitoring. But it took bringing in 2 more senior engineers and tripling the infrastructure budget. Turns out replacing institutional knowledge is expensive. I nodded. Cheaper to respect it in the first place. George asked me to pass along a message. He wanted you to know they've implemented new compensation guidelines. Technical expertise, now, has its own career track, separate from management. Senior engineers get paid like senior engineers. Good for them. About 3 years too late, but good. Last week, TechFlow announced they'd lost their 2nd largest customer to a competitor. Jennifer Davidson, the board member who'd called to apologize, sent me a LinkedIn message. You tried to warn us. We should have listened. I messaged back. You did listen. You just decided credentials were more important than competence. Now you know the difference. Sometimes the most powerful lesson you can teach is showing what your expertise was actually worth. Not through arguments or presentations, but by letting people experience what happens when it's gone. They wanted me to understand why an MBA justified better compensation than 15 years of keeping their systems running. By walking away, I helped them understand that some knowledge can't be replaced by strategic frameworks, and some mistakes cost more than just money. They cost the respect and trust that make companies worth working for in the first place.